Hello everyone, this is the video of Legal Studies class 12 unit 2nd and the name of the unit is Topics of Law, and in this unit we are going to discuss the first topic of unit 2nd, that is law of property. So what are the contents that we will be discussing in this topic are basically meaning of property, features of property, types of property, constitutional provision of property rights, examples of movable and immovable property, and meaning of property law. So these are the contents that we are going to discuss under the heading of property law. So let's begin with the concept of property. What is basically property means? Property is the unit of land, any substance or even intellectuality that essentially belongs to someone or to more than one person. So what does property mean? That property could be anything, unit of land, substance, an object or even intellectuality, and which has some value. Please keep in mind, which has some value. Without value, no property can be called as property. So meaning of property is like this. Now the next topic, that is basically what are the properties of property, means what are the features of property. So once you go through these features, you can appreciate the meaning of property as well more clearly. So let's check out what are the features. The first one is, it is physical object which has some monetary value. The second one is available publicly or privately. So it could be your personal property and it could be of government's property. Public means it's government's property. Must have enforceable rights. It means if you have some property, then you have the right, legal right to claim that is yours, and that can be enforceable in nature. No one can take away that normally. So that is enforceable rights. Next one is must have alienable rights. What is meaning of alienable? Means it is transferable right. Means if you have some property, you can gift it, you can exchange it, you can sell it. So that is alienable rights. So property has that property. Registrable means when you go to buy or sell a property, it must be registered. So it has to be registered, otherwise it has no value. Basically there is the enforceable rights that we have discussed. So until it is registered, how will you and on what ground you supposed to claim your right, what proof you have. So it's registrable means that property, if you have the registry of that property, then you can easily claim. So this is the one of the properties of property. The last one is indefeasible, that is not subject to being lost, annulled or overturned. What does it mean? That if there is some property, it has to be permanent in nature. Well, there are some property that is fragile, you can say that, and that can be lost. But the thing that we are discussing here, it has to be permanent in nature. And while discussing the types of property, you can appreciate. Okay, so now let's check out what are the types of property. Primarily we have two types of property. The first one is movable property and the second one is immovable property. What is movable property? That is the property which can be moved from one place to another place, is categorized as movable property. For example, jewelry, vehicles, furniture, electronic gadgets, etc. are the movable property. Though there are more, we will discuss later, but these are the perceptible movable property that you can appreciate at this point in time. So this is the kind of property that can be lost, that cannot be permanent in nature, some of them, because of any reason. Let's take example of electronic gadgets. If it is something like outdated and some machinery is getting something like not working, then it is no worth, so that is no more property. So it could be, but the kind of property we are discussing about, that is permanent kind of property, that is immovable property, and we are going to focus in this topic only on immovable property, not on movable property. That's for your understanding. I have categorized or basically given the types of property so that you can know what are the types of properties. So now let's come back to immovable property. The property which cannot be moved in any condition or in any point in time, rather remains stand still at the same place throughout its life, is known as immovable property. For example, house, apartment, unit of land, and benefits arising out of land and all other things permanently attached to earth. So now you understood what is meaning of immovable property. If something fixed with the land, basically with the earth, then it is known as immovable property. But one point more you need to focus on, that is it cannot be moved. So it is fixed in such a way that its mobility is not possible in any condition, and if it is mobile, then it is no more immovable property. So it is permanent in nature, that we have discussed while discussing the properties of property. So now you can correlate that property with this feature. One more point that you need to know at this point in time, that is movable property is governed by Sale of Goods Act 1930 and immovable property is governed by Transfer of Property Act 1882. So we are discussing only about the Transfer of Property Act, means immovable property, not the movable property. So keep in mind. So whatever we are discussing here, we are discussing by keeping in mind the immovable property, not the movable property. So let's check out what is the difference between movable property and immovable property. As defined in the Transfer of Property Act, that immovable property doesn't include standing timber, growing crops or grass. Created some confusion, isn't it? Because this definition, I said standing timber means the tree, growing crops and grass. These are not the immovable property, whereas as per our definition or the concept, the thing that is permanently attached with the earth is known as immovable property. So tree of course attached with the earth permanently, but it is not immovable property, rather movable. So let's check out what is the difference. In the case Shantabai versus State of Bombay, the distinction between movable and immovable property was defined as regarding this tree. Keep in mind, if the intention is to reap fruits from the trees, then it is regarded as an immovable property. But if the intention is to cut down the tree and use it as timber, it would be regarded as movable property. So now I believe you must understood. The point is, as said here in this case Shantabai versus State of Bombay, that if a tree that is of course permanently fixed with the earth, so if you have the intention to get benefit out of its fruits, then it is considered as permanent and immovable property. But if your intention, basically owner's intention is to cut that tree and get benefit out of the timber after cutting that and carry away the things, so in such a condition it is considered as movable property. So depending upon the nature and the way it is going to used. Okay, so this is the difference between movable and immovable property. Now let's check out the constitutional provision on the property rights. Part 12 and Article 300A states that no person shall be deprived of his property saved by authority of law. So what does it mean? That if you have some property, no one can take away that. That is yours, means yours. So that is the constitutional provision regarding the property rights. Now let's check out examples of movable property. Right to worship, that is in the temple or mosque or church, anything. A copyright, this is the last chapter of this unit. We will discuss that what is copyright is, but you can understand it and you can now know it that it is movable property, not immovable. The interest of a partner in a partnership firm. Next one is a right to get maintenance. These are movable property, keep in mind. A right to obtain the specific performance of an agreement to sell. Government promissory notes. Machinery that is not permanently attached to the earth and can be shifted from one place to another. And a standing timber, growing crops and grass. Regarding this point we have discussed in detail just a few minutes ago, because it could be either movable property or immovable property depending upon the nature you are going to use. Now let's check out the examples of immovable property. Right to collect rents of immovable property means if you have some house or apartment and you rent it out, so you have the right to collect the rent to get the benefit out of that. A right to weigh on piece of land. It is a little difficult for you to understand, but don't worry. Understand it with an example. For example, there is a piece of land. On the front side, the owner is someone else, and on the back side, owner is someone else. But the person who is at the back side, his entry or exit, that's supposed to be going through the property of the owner whose property lying at the front side. So in such a condition, if that is the only way to enter or to exit, in that condition, the person who has the backyard property, he will get the right in the property of the person who has the front side property. So that is right to weigh on a piece of land. Next one is right to collect lac from the tree. So there is a tree that having this feature or basically this substance lac, that is adhesive substance used in just pasting something. So if your intention is to getting benefit out of that lac, then that is immovable property. Next one is a right to fisheries, fishing and all. Right to receive future rents and profits of land. So future, it's talking about the future, not currently at present you are getting benefit out of that, but in future if you have the right to get the benefit out of that, then that is also considered as immovable property. Next one is reversion in property leased. What does it mean? That if you have just leased your property to someone, so after the completion of the fixed time period that is mentioned on the agreement, that property again come back to you or basically in the hand of real owner. So that is reversion in property leased. A factory. So these are the examples of immovable property. The last point of this topic is what is property law. Now we have understood everything about the property, what property is, what are the types of property, what is basically what are the features of the property. So now the point is what is property law, because this is the class of law. So definitely we are going to study ultimately the law, not the everything about the property. So whatever the things we should know about the property in order to understand the property law, we have discussed. So from now onwards we will be discussing the law regarding those property. So what is property law? The set of rules that governs the various forms of ownership, tenancy and transfer of property in real property as well as personal property is known as property law. So if you have property and you have the right, enforceable right that we have studied, and if you want to sell it, if you want to rent it out or give on lease, so if you want to just do anything, you need a law, you need some rules. So the rules that governs all these things, that is known as property law. The law that governs, as we have discussed above as well, that is transaction transfer of immovable property, is known as Transfer of Property Act. Basically it is enacted in 1882. So this is all for this video. In next video we will be discussing about the transfer of property. So see you in next video.